Hello everyone, welcome to the IEEE RAS Solidworks series. So if you're a mechanical engineer who wants to better learn how to use Solidworks, or just like any other major who just wants to learn how to use Solidworks better, I think this is going to be a great course for you. Right, so what we're going to do is, in this 1.1 module, we're just going to start off by showing you a little bit about the outline of Solidworks and a little bit the interface. And then kind of at the end we'll talk about how we move around in Solidworks, how we move our camera around, because working in a 3D space can always be a little bit challenging. Alright, so the first thing is first is normally when you start up SolidWorks, you won't see anything in the middle. Eventually later on in another module, we're going to learn how to physically make the parts inside SolidWorks, but for now this is just a visual aid that you'll see in the middle. Now, just like anything else, when you start a document or some sort of saved file, right, just in SolidWorks, as you can see, there's the top menu, File, and you can click Save to obviously save your work, or Save As to save whatever part you're working on, or Assembly as a brand new project file. Right, so those are just two things you probably are aware of, but I just want to go over just anyway. Right. And of course, the very first thing that we're going to go over as part of the SolidWorks platform is just how to use the system settings, right? So if you look at the very top, there's a little gear icon, right? Kind of the right of this little stop sign rebuild option, right? But if you click on that little drop-down menu and click Options, it can bring up this little Options menu that's very helpful. Now, the very beginning is just system options, right? It would take me years to kind of go through every single setting here, but just note that there's a lot of really useful different kinds of settings in here you can use. But more specifically, we want to go inside document properties. So system options is for SolidWorks in general, and document properties is where we'll see things very specific about the file we're working with. In particular, I think the very useful thing to you is going to be the unit section, right? So any mechanical engineer, when you're starting a project, you have to say what kind of unit system are you using. Often, the two you're probably going to use is the millimeter/gram/second unit system, right, which is our just normal metric system, especially useful if you're designing very small parts, like something you might 3D print. And then there's also the IPS, or inch/pound/second system, right? So if you prefer to use inches, pounds, seconds, or the millimeter/gram/second system, the MMGS and the IPS systems are all available for you to use. I would start off with this system in the beginning of your project and make sure that everyone is clear on what system you're using. You know, it's one of the best ways to start a technical project. So just because of me, I like the millimeter/gram/second system, so I'm going to stay with that and click OK. Right? Just a lot of different things that are available for you to use. Right. So one of the things I want to show you is I want to show you the SolidWorks menu, the SolidWorks bar that's at the top here, right, and the different kind of little areas, right? There's a lot of stuff here that you won't use initially, but just for the beginning of basic SolidWorks CAD, we're going to look at some of these different little submenus here. The first menu that should be already available to you is the Features menu, right? So typically, SolidWorks, whenever you're working with it, you can have 3D operations, which is kind of like actions you can take to kind of 3D model whatever your object is. Right, so in this case, you can see we can have extrusions, revolving, things like sweeps, boundary boss faces, and there's a whole lot of things, fillets, ribs, wraps. Really, there's just a whole lot of different kind of 3D options, right? So as you go through and create your 3D object in SolidWorks, you'll have all these different kind of 3D operations in the Features menu. But before that, we'll be using the Sketch menu, right? And the Sketch menu is kind of really what makes SolidWorks special, right? Because the Sketch menu is where you find a lot of the 2D operations, like drawing lines, you know, being able to dimension certain sketches, being able to make arcs, ellipses. All of these things are something we'll go on in another unit, or another module. Right? Sketching points, mirroring certain patterns that you sketch, right? How SolidWorks works is that you create a sketch pattern and then you extrude or alter that sketch pattern in some way that creates a 3D model, right? So this kind of cube thing you see, this block you see on my screen, I basically created a original sketch, which was that 2D linear sketch, and then I extruded it, right? So it's the combination of features in the Sketch menu that allow you to create these 3D models. Finally, we have the Evaluate section, right? So the evaluate section is particularly useful, right? There's lots of different things. You can talk about mass properties, right? If you assign materials to certain blocks or anything like that. This is more the analytical portion of SolidWorks. But one of the very best things is if you're working with a 3D part and for some reason you don't recommend or you don't remember some sort of unit, or you don't remember what the length of this is, we can use the measure tool, right? So for example, I might want to measure, if I click that measure tool, I can click on two sides and figure that, hey, the distance between these two sides is 40 millimeters, which is pretty much exactly what I used, and it offers some additional area as well. But the evaluate tool typically takes information about your model and evaluates it and gives you some sort of analytical result. For now, we'll just kind of keep it like that. Alright, so really these three tabs, the Feature, Sketch, and Evaluate tabs, are the ones you're definitely going to be the most familiar with as you work on this course. And the last thing I want to kind of show you is a little bit about how to move around and navigate yourself around a 3D model in SolidWorks. If you've never used some sort of 3D editing software like this, it's definitely good to be familiar with how to move around, right? And most of the time, all of your different your moving operations, your camera movement, is usually controlled with your mouse and some additional keys on your keyboard. So for example, if I take my middle mouse button, right, and I just press my middle mouse button down, right, I get a rotate tool, right? So as you can see, I can move my mouse around left or right, kind of rotates it that way, up and down, and you can really kind of get crazy with it and just kind of move your mouse around to rotate this object. Right? Very simple kind of rotate tool, but after a while it's going to be kind of weird moving it like this. So there's different options that you want. Right? So then we want to use the Shift, Control, and Alt keys all to kind of alternate the way we're currently using SolidWorks. So one is the Shift key, right? So the Shift key, if I hold the middle mouse button down and hold Shift at the same time, right, I can kind of move up and down directions. This is a great way to move in and out of your object without kind of changing the camera angle, right? The mouse button will do the same thing, except the mouse button always focuses, if I just scroll my mouse button, it's going to zoom in or out, right? But it's focused on the specific point that you maybe move your mouse over, so it's not entirely accurate always. However, you can get a very gradual and nice zoom on a certain point that's kind of stuck there using the Shift key and holding your middle mouse button down. This is very useful when you want to get closer to your part. There's also the Control key, right? So if you hold middle mouse button down and hold your middle mouse button down and hold the Control key down as well, right? You get kind of a translating slide, right? So if you think your screen as a plane, you can translate your object inside the plane. Now this is not me moving the object, right? It's only me moving my camera relative to the object, since the white background has no reference points. Right, and then we also have the Alt key. So if I hold the Alt key down and take my middle mouse button, you'll see that now, right, I can rotate the object inside the plane. So if you ever want to turn your object upside down for any reason, you can kind of see that available there. A lot of different useful tricks you can do. So the Shift, Control, and Alt keys, you can kind of change the camera angle, right, and just by holding your middle mouse button down and moving it back and forth, you'll get a lot of kind of control on which way you're using it. Now, just a couple other things I want to show you real quick before we finish this up is that for one, right, there's lots of different little icons here in SolidWorks. You'll learn a lot of them as you go, right, but it's pretty good to kind of learn about what these other sections of SolidWorks are. So for example, let's look at the feature tree over here, right? So if we look to the left, there's something called the feature tree, right? And now there's a lot of other different sections, right? Mainly the feature tree. So this will show this is my entire part that I'm working on, and parts are just solid parts. Like if you think of a screw or a nail, that's one solid mass or a part that you'll be working with. It also shows any sketches or extrusions, right, or any 3D modeling operations that I kind of do over the course of a project, as well as things like planes, right? So I have a right plane, a top plane, and a front plane, right? All these different kind of reference kind of reference geometry, was what we call it in SolidWorks. All different things that kind of show, hey, this is the top of the part, this is the front of the part, or these planes kind of define that. And then of course we have materials, so all of this contains information about our particular project. Finally, a really great way to kind of move more in SolidWorks is if you kind of look at this menu, there's a lot of different things like zoom to fit, zoom to area, previous view, selection view, dynamic, all these different kind of items, right? You have a display style. So if you kind of don't like the shaded edges, you can make it just a normal block part. You can make it hidden lines removed, right? There's all sorts of crazy little display properties you can do. I'm just going to keep it like this. But here's the really important one right here, view orientation. So if you ever feel like you need to align with your part a very certain way, the view orientation is the best way to do this. So if I wanted to go to the front of the part, I can click on the front, this little front surface here, and you'll see that now I'm orientated perfectly, with the front plane of the object. And I can keep changing. If I kind of make my middle mouse button, I can adjust. So if I wanted an isometric point of view for my object, it's a great way to do this too. So you can kind of just click this object, find different surfaces. Maybe you want a view where you're seeing you kind of like at a 45-degree angle and you're seeing the top plane and the side plane. Right? This is a great way to orientate yourself towards a certain face of the object, whether it be front, top, left, right, back, anything you want, and really get a better view of the object overall. Right? So overall, being able to orientate yourself in a 3D space is part of an engineer's job description, basically. I'm sure many of y'all, if y'all are engineers, you had to take some sort of 3D evaluation, or 3D analysis evaluation during the summer where you have to click on certain blocks and rotate them in your mind, right? This is part of the reason why, because you need to be familiar with rotating and analyzing a part in 3 dimensions, right? So with that, I believe that's all of section 1.1, right? Outline and interface. So we'll be moving, in the next video, we'll be moving on to seeing how sketching and smart dimensioning works. All part of the 2D SolidWorks operations menu, which is called Sketch. So I'll see y'all next time, and I can't wait to keep teaching y'all more about SolidWorks.